So now I'd like to introduce our final speaker for this evening, Professor Abu-Rabi, who is a Palestinian who was born in Nazareth, Galilee. He holds dual citizenship in the US and Israel. Dr. Abu-Rabi earned 3 degrees at American universities before becoming a professor at Virginia Commonwealth University. He also held a Rockefeller Fellowship at the Center for Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Texas. He is currently the chair in Islamic Studies at the University of Alberta. He has a special interest in the study and practice of interfaith dialogue between the Islamic and Christian religious traditions. Dr. Abu-Rabi specializes in issues of contemporary Islamic thought, particularly on religion and society and mysticism. He is fluent in Hebrew, Arabic, and English, and some of his publications include Jewish-Muslim Dialogue, Israel's Fate Will Be Tied to the Middle East, and Trends and Issues in Contemporary Arab Thought. So please join me in welcoming Professor Abu-Rabi.
Thank you very much for this introduction. As our friend said, I was born in Nazareth, not Nazareth, Texas, but Nazareth, Palestine. But the Bible said, no good man comes out of Nazareth. Right, that's the Bible, the Old Testament. Before I came here, I thought about what I should say tonight. And I thought of talking about Palestine from the prism of literature and poetry. I think that we have heard enough about politics and history and sociology and all of that. So I'm going to try to read you some of my poetry about Palestine. Before I do that, I would like to share this with you. As you well know, suffering is human in nature. It's not only Buddhist, it's human in nature. All of us suffer, human beings. And because of the notion of suffering, I had always refused to listen to TV, to watch TV or radio, especially when it comes to Palestine, the issue of Palestine, and the Palestine-Israel conflict, because of the so much pain and suffering, and also because of collective memory. If you are a Palestinian, your collective memory goes back in terms of suffering to at least the latter part of the 19th century. If you are Jewish, it goes back, I don't know, to perhaps 2,000–3,000 years ago. So collective memory is very significant in the presentation and portrayal of suffering, the suffering of any human being and any individual and any nation. When I grew up in Nazareth, although I am Muslim, I grew up in an Armenian Catholic background. And I did not know much about the Armenians, many of whom had migrated to Greater Syria after World War I. When I became older, I came to know much about the Armenian genocide and tragedy during the First Great War. Then, of course, I was born after 1948, and I could watch my dad and his generation suffer so much because of the tragedy of 48 and what happened to the Palestinian people after 1948. My dad and his generation could not deal with that sense of tragedy. They wanted to escape from it. My dad in particular, who died like 7 years ago, kept thinking about his refugee sister, who became a refugee in the largest refugee camp outside of Damascus, Syria, which has almost 500,000 Palestinian refugees in Syria. And he kept thinking about his brothers in Jordan, in Lebanon, and other relatives. And from that angle, he could not deal with that sense of tragedy. I do come from a large extended family, as many Palestinians do. I come from a working class family, and I'm very proud of that. And when I was growing up, I used to hear my parents talk about their absent relatives. When I was a little child, I wondered why it was taking the absent relatives so much time to come back, and they never came back. When I grew older, I began to understand the complex situation of the Palestine-Israel conflict, but I was never able to understand why my country, Israel, where I was born, had opened its gates to all sorts of strange people coming from Australia or Russia or the States or the UK or Ethiopia later on. But it was not allowing the indigenous people to come back to their land. My parents, who were in their teens in '48, when the Nakba or the tragedy happened, were scared to speak about that here. It reminded them of so much fear and trepidation, of so much rupture in their life and in the life of Palestinian society. My parents had always looked broken-hearted. They could not express their feelings after 1948. Sometimes my father would burst out in anger at the whole political situation, and my mother would burst out in tears. It was such a confusing situation for us kids, growing up in that situation. When I grew older, I was determined to go to Syria, to Jordan and Lebanon, and as you know, with an Israeli passport, you cannot do that unless Israel occupies these countries. So in 1989, after I became a naturalized American citizen, I was able to go to Syria. I was in Ankara, Turkey at the time. I went to the Syrian embassy in Ankara and I applied for a visa, and I said, you know, in the Syrian application form, there is a line, have you ever been to occupied Palestine? Imagine. And I'm supposed to say that I have never been to occupied Palestine, because I wanted the visa. So I was supposed to lie to get the visa in order to go and see my aunt and my uncles and different relatives in the refugee camp outside of Damascus, Syria. I remember when the Syrian embassy stamped my passport with a visa saying that I was able to visit, I was just beyond myself. I became elated, excited, confused, but also scared. The next day I took a bus all the way from Ankara to Damascus. It was a 15-hour trip, one of the best trips that I had ever taken. After 15 hours on the bus, on a mediocre Turkish bus that we call in Turkish dolmuş, we have a Turkish lady here, I reached Damascus. And just like Paul in the New Testament, I was struck by enlightenment on the way to Damascus. Oh Damascus, how many foreign armies have trespassed your sacred sanctuary? And how many beautiful women have shed tears for the absent ones? In the central station in Damascus, I took a taxi to the refugee camp. It's a 15-minute drive from downtown Damascus. And I went there looking for my aunt, but I had no address. I'd never met my aunt. A child led me to the house of my aunt. He had known her. I met her. She died, by the way, 15 months ago. I met her over 20 years ago. She was a venerable, simple woman from the countryside of Palestine who harbored no hatred or animosity towards anyone. The meeting with my aunt and her husband was such a tragic meeting. They could not ask me except about 1948, and I was born several years after 48. I did not know 48 at all. They asked me about the city, about Nazareth. They asked me about the trees, the mountains, the donkeys. I said I had never seen any donkey in Nazareth. It's full of cars. It's highly polluted nowadays. I was in the States when my mother passed away 10 years ago. And the night, and this is, all of us human beings who go through that, Armenians, Jews, Palestinians, Africans, Latin Americans, all of us would go through that suffering. The night my mother died, I was restless. I spent an agonizing night. A mysterious force descended on me, and all sorts of hidden emotions and feelings flared up within me. I could read my fathomless depth with a microscope. I knew that death had been visiting a loved one. Yet I could not imagine that it was my mom who was being visited by death. I had many scary dreams in exile. My mom was there all the time, looking at me with stern eyes. She was not smiling, she was not crying. She was there, hovering around me as though she was trying to reach out to protect me from wilderness and exile. Her stern eyes pierced me through and through. My inside became like a wounded flesh. I dreamt I was all bones. Death slept in my sleeves. She kept staring at me, just at me, while saying, "Where have you been, son? I have been waiting for you to witness my last moments on this earth. I have been waiting for you to celebrate the exit of my soul from this world. Didn't I celebrate with deep pain and unbelievable suffering your exit from the darkness of my womb to the light of this world?" I was in exile in both cases, when my mom gave birth to me and when she passed away. I was unable to attend to her suffering, to her wounds in both cases. I needed her in both cases. In the moment of birth, I needed her protection, her affection, her care, and her love. In the moment of her death, I needed her to shield me from the death that she was going through. I expected, though, she would go through death with pride and strength, and that she would pave the way for me to meet death without fear and hesitation. When I was 15 years old, I went to help out my dad in his construction business. He used to work in a small Jewish town built on expropriated Arab land, halfway between Nazareth and Haifa. My dad was working for a Jewish family that had migrated from Poland. And it was my first time going to help him out. So I went to that home. It was inhabited, of course, by a Jewish family. And the moment I stepped on the front yard of the house, a gentle, elderly woman came out to speak with me, only with me. I was 15 years old. She spoke in broken Hebrew. At the time I was learning Hebrew. And I still cannot forget her beautiful and sad eyes. She was East European. During the lunch break, she came out again with hundreds of photographs for her only son, who had passed away in one of the Israeli invasions or raids in South Lebanon. I could not forget that moment. It was pretty sad to see that gentle old lady, who it turns out had been a Holocaust survivor, mourn the death of her son. Here is a woman who lost the only son that she had in the battlefield. What's fascinating about this woman and my aunt, whom I met later on, was that their sad eyes looked the same. They looked alike. When I met my aunt, she said to me, I do not hate Jews. I just want to go back to my house. As you know, in Palestinian literature, the master of Palestinian elegy and suffering is the late poet Mahmoud Darwish, who passed away this past summer. And I'm not going to read from Mahmoud Darwish. There are 6 or 7 books of his that have been translated into English. But I want to share with you 2 poems of mine about Palestine, the last of which I wrote in January of this year about Gaza. The title of the first one, which I wrote at the height of the Second Palestinian Intifada in the year 2002, is Who Will Weep for Palestine? Greet our house for us, O stranger. Kiss the stones of our backyard. Embrace the leaves of our trees. They have shed so many tears since our departure. And take care of the animals too, who have gone hungry since we left. And do not forget to pray at the grave of my mother, for all the strength that I have has come from her. And greet Father for us in the chaos of the night, in the chaos of departure. He was left behind, and although we smell his presence all the time, he's disappeared from our sight. Do you remember the routes of our migration? I was a baby then, and my mother forgot me hanging in the saddle of our donkey, who was shot for trying to return home. Since that time I have been weeping for the death of our beloved donkey, who sacrificed his soul for mine. You who are coming from across the seas, fortified with the claims of civilization and the claims of peace and democracy, take your civilization away and leave us to our simple ways, to our fig and olive trees. Take your tanks out of our refugee camps and take your snipers out of our heart. You have been asking us to stop our anger at dispossession, at humiliation, so that our Arab emirs and sheikhs can gamble away the wealth of the desert, or that their American friends and patrons can suck out the oil from the faucets of the desert and get drunk in the corridors of Washington and London. You can exile us, strangle our kids, and murder our neighbors, but please be kind to our dreams, to our past. Do not murder our future together, because someday we must learn how to live together, how to coexist in peace and fraternity. We, the humiliated and the defeated, have extended our hands to you all this time, begging you to forgive us for the sins we had never committed, begging you to drink our coffee with us, to eat our food with us, and even to sleep in our bed. But you have refused. You wanted our coffee, our food, and our bed without us. You have thrown us into the nightmare of exile, into the abyss of agony. You broke in the feet of a whole generation, gouged their eyes, and left them to bleed to their death. And we are still begging you to be merciful, to be mindful of our plight. We still believe there is an atom of humanity within you. How sad is it to walk the streets of our cold town, holding the departed one's hands, and how sad is it to think of your eyes that are full of tears, and how tragic that I am left alone after your departure from this life, left alone, unprotected, and unsafe. Please take time from your place of rest to call on me. This last poem, as I said, I wrote this on January 16th of this year to the martyrs of Gaza. Yet we wake up to a new day full of slaughter and pain, and you are not here to give us any solace. You've left us alone in the madhouse of this world, belly up and bleeding with tears and emotions. Yet I seek you, O God, in this darkness of the world. I need you more than ever. And I seek you, O Mom, in this darkness of the world. I need your smile, your smell, and your presence. O departed ones, O saintly martyrs, farewell to you with your excessive idealism. Farewell to you with your untold stories. Farewell to you with your broken noses. Farewell to you with your wounded spirits. Farewell to you with your hungry stomachs. Farewell to you with trampled upon graves. Do not forgive us. Do not condemn us. Do forgive us. We have failed you. We've spoken behind your back. We have engaged in many trivial things while you sacrificed your souls for us. Yesterday they stormed a refugee camp, killing many people. And here I stand perplexed, confused, angry, and depressed. I find myself in a frenzy, standing still, moving fast without a purpose, eating too much, fasting to death, praying, and traveling the high corridors of the world while listening to Bob Marley singing loudly in the fields of Jamaica and Africa, and delivering me to my solitude with you. Where are you, O God, in this spiritual desert? We beseech you to water our dry arteries with your mercy, to lift the many veils that have entrapped us, and free us from this material world, and unite us with the poor, with the dispossessed, the humiliated, and the dead. In the burning night, in the refugee camps of Gaza, I glimpsed the eyes of the wanderers by night, searching for food and praying that no more bombs would fall on their heads. I feel the pain of your stomachs, and I become ashamed of our affluence. We've made you poorer than before and expunged you from our conscience. Yet every day we talk about the virtues of our civilization. You are starving in front of our eyes, yet we enjoy our snacks and drinks while watching you on TV. When we bomb the hell out of your devastated refugee camps and rugged mountains, we claim with a big smile that we stand for mercy and human rights, and we are the only democracy in the backward East. And the cold, dreary eyes of the military experts dominate our TV screens, telling us about the great victory we have achieved against the enemy. I feel the breath of the desert, sound the soul of the mountains, crying out in pain after waves and waves of precision-tuned bombs penetrate the subterranean depths of nature and of your refugee camps. The aching heart of the world saturates my being, lifting me away from the pain of those innocent children. However, I see you in the mountains in the streets of Africa, in our downtowns in North America. No one greets you and none bids you farewell. You've been deserted and alienated, but blessed are the aliens, since they are the heirs of the kingdom of God. Yes, our spiritual starvation does not acknowledge your blessedness. Come closer to me. Your martyrdom has ignited the flames of life in this dreary season. Come closer to me and revive my poor soul. You are the salt of the earth. You are the perfume of our existence. Thank you.